Hello and welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be having a look at a new piece I have written called Classical Moments. In it, we're going to be having a look at broken chord bass lines, tricky finger patterns, and elegant phrasing. So grab your favorite drink and join me in today's video whilst we explore this new piece of music. First, let's have a listen to the whole piece played through, and then we'll break it down into smaller parts to study together. Here is Classical Moments. So I hope you enjoyed a listen through Classical Moments. At the beginning of this piece then, we'll notice there is no key signature with sharps and flats in, meaning that we are in the C major or A minor key area. You'll also notice at the beginning of this piece we've got probably the most famous Italian instruction for musicians, allegro. This means lively. And it's also a good thing to think with these words that they're often a characterization of the piece, embodied in a word, as much as an instruction to you. In other words, you can try to play this piece in a more lively way, of course, to enhance the way that it feels, but I think also you would struggle to play this piece in an unlively fashion. So the allegro acts as much a description as an instruction, which is often true for other words as well. As we look through the beginning of the piece then, let's first study this phrasing. Now I haven't written phrase marks into this piece, I want to help you use your initiative a little bit more with them. We'll see that the piece has got a total of 8 bars, so it may well fall into the classic 4-bar phrasing. Let's have a play through the right hand and see what we think. Where does the first sentence feel like it has a little rest point? I think there feels like a very obvious rest point. We can feel that the first phrase has come to a little pause, the longer note helping it feel that way. It then picks up into a new pattern, and finishes here. Now, each of those points, we can see, is not going to be necessarily at the end of a bar or in a regular place. It's true really that at the beginning of the classical period, there were a lot more conventional phrases to be found than at the end. My piece is based more on the end of the classical period, when famous composers like Mozart and Beethoven were writing their music. People often think of Mozart and Beethoven as the creators of the classical period, but actually they were probably the best known musicians from the end of it, and they certainly used all of the tricks and tips that the previous composers for the last 50 or so years had been using, and enhanced these types of feelings within their pieces as well. We'll note that Mozart often uses irregular phrasing in his pieces towards the end of the 18th century. And as we listen to this piece, that's exactly what we get, a feeling of moving from one place to another, not necessarily in a regular fashion, but it does all feel very comfortable. Next then, let's have a look towards the end of the piece. We rise up this next figure, and then we reach this bar with all of the notes in. And then we're at the end. So where was the rest point? Well, this piece features that lovely bar 7 with all of its twists and turns, and this can be thought of rather like a cadenza. A cadenza, which is the Italian word for cadence, is a passage of music often containing lots of twists and turns, really extending a cadence. If you would like more information on what a cadence is, I'll make a video on this, so please leave me a comment below if that would be helpful to you. A cadence, in short though, is a collection of chords 2 or 3 usually, which indicates an ending or a pause, or maybe that the piece wants to continue. And a cadenza, therefore, kind of enhances this by putting a lot of notes where there could have just been some simple chords, making a more decorative feel and creating more tension towards the end of a passage. So this stretches out my piece of music, helping it to feel more exciting towards the end. And it's something you'll find in lots of places in earlier and later music in different ways. So that's the layout of the piece. Not as easy as it might seem, and we need to make sure that we can feel those phrases. We're starting at the beginning again, and let's see what we can do. How do we make the first phrase feel as it should? So the phrase starts high and drops low. I'm going to hold slightly on the first of these scale notes, and then push, and then run up and rest. It's a case of holding at the beginning, resisting, then we push through, and then we just rest up to the top again. So, resist, push, and hold again a little bit back at the top. In an exaggerated way, you can feel that curve, and here we have it on the screen. Resist, push, and then hold or relax towards the end. And then the last few notes just finish off that lovely phrase, completing the G7 chord. As we move into the next part of the piece, then we can see a broken chord, first of C major, then the G7 chord again, and then we get this acceleration into semiquavers, resting back on C again. So we can feel the phrasing in there in two different ways. The broken chord wants to be quite precise, and then we can apply our curve again, push and pull, resist, push, down. You can sort of feel that slight difference in tempo. It shouldn't be much. And then again rising up a little slower, and then push and rest. Everything is subtly shaded then, like this. And you have to almost conduct your way through to feel where those passages want to go. So that's the basis for those parts. I'll also mention then just briefly the way the cadenza should be phrased. There isn't really a rule to this, but conventionally they'll often do a very similar thing with a curve in the same way. Unfortunately, where the push bit is often the most complex for fingers. Resist, push, and then rest. And if you want it to sound a little bit blurry with the pedal, I will let you do that. There are no rules in this. It sounds quite good that way too. Or more cleanly. However it feels best to you. If you are playing classical music that's actually from the classical period and genuinely wants to be more authentic, then of course ask your teacher how best to perform each individual piece. Every composer and every one of their pieces may have a slightly different need, or you may want to be slightly more authentic or slightly more interpretive. And as always, the teacher is best placed to give you that advice. If you are interested in one-to-one online lessons, you can visit my website here for more information. Next then, let's have a look at the left hand. I've mentioned a few times now that we're dealing with a lot of C chords and a lot of G7 chords. But what exactly are those chords? Well, in the C major scale, we'll see that C is note number 1 and G is note number 5. This means that C is the tonic note and G is the dominant note. These are the degrees of the scale, and those chords will be the most commonly used, especially in classical music, where there's a strong sense of going from chord 1 to chord 5 in a lot of cases. And this gives a very moving forward type of feel. And it's often what will appear at the end in a very back and forth way to create a triumphant certainty to the ending. In my piece then, we have that C chord of C, E and G broken down into a pattern like the Alberti style of patterns will be. and then the G chord of G, B and D, which is inverted to B and D and G in this case, like this. And throughout this piece, for the first 4 bars, that is all we see. In the middle, though, we suddenly find ourselves confronted with E flat. Now this may seem a little bit out of place. After all, C major is related to A minor. We may expect a G sharp as a raised 7th, certainly not an E flat. So what is it then? Well, if we add the E flat to the C chord, as appears in bar 5, you'll hear we have a C minor chord. And it's another fairly typical movement to move to what's known as the tonic minor, as in the first chord's minor version, C major moving to C minor. This means then that as I move from C minor to G major, we get this lovely feeling that we would do from C minor, but it's still related to the beginning because the note letters are the same. And this is something that's typical of the classical period as well, a very common movement to the tonic minor. As we look through that pattern then, we'll see lots of C minor and G chords, 1s and 5s. We'll also see at the end in the cadenza more octaves to allow for clarity. And then, as I mentioned, a lovely ending from G chords to the C minor chord, which you can make as dramatic as you like. So there are the chords. Next then, let's do some finger work. I have gone to great lengths in this piece to provide you with what I think are the best fingers, especially on bar 7. That took a little bit of going back and forth to find what felt the most comfortable. But even at the beginning, there should be a troublesome part, and you'll need to follow the fingers carefully. 2 and 3 here, so that you can reach with your thumb to the B and end up on the top note of F with finger 5. If you don't do this, and just come back onto the thumb, you'll have an awkward moment. And we don't want one of those there, because it'll be very hoppy and unpleasant. So sometimes we need to stretch our movements out, and instead of just going over and back, we can go over, put an extra finger in, and then come back. And that just works out right for this passage. 5, down to the thumb, and then instead of coming back to the thumb, give yourself an extra point and go across to 3 and then back on 1 now. And in one slick movement, we magically have enough fingers. The next parts of the piece then should be okay for you to play through, a couple of fingers marked in to help you on your way. But let's get down to that cadenza and deal with the big problems that it creates. So, it's a passage of irregular things. There are lots of notes in there which we wouldn't necessarily expect, and thus there is no conformed finger pattern for such a thing already. So individually then, I have gone through it with 1 and 2, 4 and 1. And as we move up through the pattern, you can sort of feel your way through and see how that works for you. I do think at the beginning, the 1, 2, 4, 1 is fairly critical. It puts you in good stead for the rest, and then at the top, the 5 and 1 here is a little uncomfortable, and that is maybe where I spent the most time thinking, yeah, do we want to try something else? But honestly, this was the least bad thing within all of the options, and as I say, you can't get rid of the difficulty, you can only move it. So here it is, I've put it all just in that place, which then frees us up to play down in a more regular way for the rest of the pattern. So I hope those finger numbers help you on your way. If you do have fun playing through classical moments and you've enjoyed this free piece of music, I'd be very grateful if you could subscribe to the channel, where you'll be notified about more pieces like this if you press the bell icon, and if you could like this video, that would really help me out as well. Many thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Enjoy the journey.